Emir of Qatar, Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, and Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al Sisi. Oh yeah, wait, I know this guy. Abdel Fattah.
Jesus, like, this guy speaks with such fucking confidence about what's going on in the Middle East and the U.S. role in it. Oh, sorry to hear that, Riveroon. And he's, like, reading these names like he's never seen them before. Like, the capital of fucking Qatar. He actually reads that like, huh? I thought it was Do-Re. Sí, no. Conche tu madre, weón. Si no sabí nada de la wea, entonces limítate a jugar videojuego, alguna mierda así, pues, weón.
I actually do believe Israel won't just bomb countless civilians.
What? I got nothing. Back the shit up.
Believe Israel won't, realistically, is not Israel. I actually do believe Israel won't just bomb countless civilians.
Motherfucker, they already have. They have already committed a massacre that, I mean, historians, like mainstream historians, are trying to figure out what the most recent parallel is. And and it turns out like World War II is about the closest they can find anything. Like this century, this is the worst massacre of civilians that has been seen. It is certainly the absolutely most evil thing I have lived through in my lifetime. I mean, and they've murdered 40,000 people. They're deliberately starving 2 million people to death. And this motherfucker's like, oh, I really don't think that they're gonna bomb large numbers of civilians?
All right, so before we get to the real topic of today's segment, I want to go over a tweet exchange that kind of lays out the state of the discourse in lefty politics right now.
God, every time he says lefty, I just want to, like, give him a left hook.
And why
a lefty hook.
What Biden is doing that we're going to be talking about is so important.
You mean the fact that he's doing genocide, right? Yeah, that's what's so important. And also, like, just doing Nazi shit on the border?
Excuse me. So, I was scrolling through Twitter earlier today, and I saw a tweet that...
On Twitter?
...had an alarming amount of likes. It's probably gotten even more by now, because these kind of tweets, especially lately, go massively viral in the online left. It seems like right now... Twitter is split between Nazis and Trump supporters and leftists who are not going to vote and want Trump to win. Well, not really want Trump to win, but want...
Who want the genocide to end, I think is what you mean.
Biden to lose. So, this is the interaction.
It's incredible, really. Biden wiped out my $80K student loan, the first president of my lifetime to enact a policy that directly, substantially, and positively impacted my life. It's worth noting for people not in the US that that is not something that most people actually had happen. Only a fairly small number of people who are suffering under the burden of these endless student loans actually got any relief at all from him. Freed up $800 a month, and I'd rather eat shit than vote for him. Yes, it got an alarming to Xanderhal number of likes, because what Biden is doing is absolutely inexcusable, and he's an absolute scumbag who really, I mean, he's murdering huge numbers of people, and he seems very cool with that. Yeah, he has a very annoying voice. I don't want to imagine Netanyahu coming. I don't care if Jesus is in the room or not.
This person says, an absolutely audacious tweet.
Wait, you know, it's audacious.
It's incredible, really. Biden wiped out my $80,000 student loan. The first president of my lifetime to enact a policy that directly, substantially, and positively impacted my life. freed up $800 a month, and I'd rather eat cat shit than vote for him. They go on to say that, you know, all the tweets of them, like, congratulating Biden for doing good policies, like, oh, I heard
Well, no, like, that's a good policy, and it's only a good policy if you think that all the rest of the people whose entire lives are being fucked up by the student debt that we had to take on when we were 18 years old, because this country finances higher education on the backs of insolvent teenagers who can never declare bankruptcy and discharge that debt and will never pay it off. That isn't actually a great policy for most people, because most of us didn't get anything out of it.
It's like they would tweet, oh, I heard Biden did this insert good thing. If that's true, I'm going to have to eat some dirt. And then people are like copy pasting all of those tweets into the replies. And they're just replying, well, that was before he did a genocide. That was before he supported genocide.
Yeah, because it turns out genocide's kind of special to a lot of people. For some people, I mean, see, the thing to know about Xanderhal is he used to be a Nazi. He wants people to pay him money because they should be proud of him for not being one anymore, and that's his grift. And so, like, maybe if when you used to be a Nazi you feel differently about genocide, I can't just help but think that that might be something to do with it. But yeah, he doesn't see genocide as the kind of red line that, you know, normal people do.
And of course, I quote tweeted saying, 37,000 likes. Politics is really just a club to these people.
The club of the 80% of people whose votes Biden needs who don't like that he's doing genocide and want him to stop.
And you've got this person right here who says, you're a genocide supporter, not listening to bitches like you in my replies.
Yeah, because fuck you.
And they follow me.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this isn't the first time he's remarked on the fact that people who have actually followed him, despite all the other shitty things he says and does all the time, are finding that he's crossing a red line with this one.
That's quite something. That is quite something. So, as you can imagine, the state of the online left is, it's quite awful.
Like, I just love that this guy whose entire origin story is one of the, an unusually significant, like, political and moral, fiasco of his, like, falling for Nazi shit, feels, despite not having done any demonstrable learning since deciding that he doesn't want to be around Nazis, though he actually still has a lot of sympathy for a lot of fascist positions, which is why Vosh likes him. He feels that he can lecture the left on things.
It's in a pretty bad state. A lot of people, no matter how good of a job Biden does as the president here domestically, as long as Israel is not literally in an unprecedented act of political defiance that has never happened in American history, like completely cut off.
That has never happened in U.S. history except the time that George Bush Sr. did it, the time George Bush Jr. did it, and the time that fucking Reagan, that's right, Reagan did it. Reagan, when the U.S. and Israel invaded Lebanon, was appalled. Reagan, not a man who was exactly afraid of bloodshed. I mean, murdered hundreds of thousands of people in Central America in particular. But what Israel was doing on the U.S.'s behalf in Lebanon was too much. He called it a Holocaust, told Begin he needed to stop it. Begin kind of sputtered a bit, and Reagan said, no, fuck you, I'm serious, you gotta stop it, and a half an hour later it was fucking over. I mean, George Bush Sr. actually threatened to cut off aid if there wasn't some kind of progress on settlements and shit. George Bush Jr. managed to get Israel to back off of lucrative deals with China by snubbing some defense ministry bureaucrats who had a scheduled visit there. And let's just remember, I mean, he's talking about in the history of the United States. First of all, Israel's been around since 1948, and the U.S. special relationship has been around since not even 1967, like the early 70s, between 67 and 73. So, yeah, what he's saying is just nonsense. Yeah, yes, Jinjiri, exactly. I was just about to say that. But, Biden actually said, yeah, actually, I would have been cool with you murdering some more women and children. Why didn't you? That Reagan, he's just a fucking sissy. And it's like, dude, I mean, like, well, why
And,
is
like,
why is
wrangled
Xanderhal?
in, then they will not support Biden. This has given the Biden administration a pretty clear signal that nothing they do to appease young, progressive Gen Z voters will get them to vote for Democrats.
As long as they're doing genocide. That's the point. It's called putting pressure on people. It's like, I mean, that's a better strategy than the one you have of, like, what is it? Just kind of trivializing the whole problem and berating people for not liking genocide? Like, there are a few hundred people who have any real input into the decision of who gets to run for president for the Democrats. There is also one person who is Joe Biden. That's a much smaller number of people to try to convince to change their minds than the millions and millions and millions of people in the US whose minds you have to somehow change on the issue of genocide. Like, this is just, he's such a fucking rube.
I genuinely believe the behavior of non-voters this election, if Biden doesn't win, will decide whether or not the Democratic Party becomes the relatively left-wing party of the United States.
Which, no. I mean, what the hell does... It already is, like, relatively left-wing doesn't mean shit. That just means that there is somebody to their right. It doesn't even mean that they are to the left in terms of public opinion, which they're not. They're actually way to the right of public opinion on a lot of things, including the issue of genocide, which they are way outside the Overton window on, which is why Joe Biden can't go anywhere anymore. His campaign events are being, like, choreographed like Nazi rock concerts that are trying to make sure Antifa doesn't hear about it in advance.
Or the unambiguously centrist to center-right leaning party of the United States, the just acting as a barely, like, unironically barely different than
That's what they already are, though. Like, motherfucker, okay, Xanderhal, I'm guessing, was not alive in the 1990s. Like, the 1990s is when this happened. The 1990s is when the Democrats decided that they could just sort of ignore working class voters for the most part, as long as they picked up a few rich right-wing voters on a few minor issues, on a few sort of wedge issues and shit like that, and they could just sort of... It's when the proportion of rich people who in the election massively jumped up between like 92 and 99. This already happened. Like, he's talking, like, Joe Biden is a guy whose campaign literature when he was running for the Senate referred to him as a true conservative. His closest associates in his interminably long fucking archaeological political career in the Senate were, like, Trent Lott, Strom Thurmond, Jesse Helms, like the KKK caucus of the Republican Party. This motherfucker has never been relatively left of anyone except, like, maybe Rudolf Hess.
Republicans party. Like much more like Mitt Romney than Barack Obama.
Well, Mitt Romney and Barack Obama were so similar that Obama just plagiarized Mitt Romney's Massachusetts healthcare plan and called it... I mean, that's what Obamacare is. It was what Mitt Romney imposed on Massachusetts.
Biden is what I'm talking about. Because clearly, Based on what the Democratic Party is seeing here, there's absolutely no reason why they should put any work into tailoring their policies around appealing to a younger voter base. They just don't vote to begin.
Well, yeah, unless they want to win elections is the thing. See, that's the idea. The idea is if they want to win elections, then obviously the largest number of people would like to see things like no genocide, maybe healthcare, maybe actually use the Higher Education Act, which allows the Department of Education to write down all student loans, no questions asked. And unlike Biden's bullshit, which his own lawyers said wouldn't hold up in court, would hold up in court because there is explicit statutory authority for it. You know, like little things like that. That's the point. It's called pressure. The idea, I mean, the problem is the Democrats actually aren't all that bothered. Aren't all that bothered about winning elections. Like, if they really wanted to win elections, they could shut the Republicans out completely. Just by actually doing things that show the overwhelming majority of the population that they've got their backs. Oh, yeah, he was born 1999? Okay, that doesn't surprise me. Yeah, so he does not remember any of this shit.
With.
And, I mean, you could say, yeah, Seagull Elise, but they're books. You could read the books. Does this motherfucker look like he's got time to read the books? He's too busy talking the shit on the internet to read the books.
And, yeah, why? So, like, what happened in the UK? Exactly. Yeah, this happened in the UK.
No, oh god, I can't wait. We've seen his attempt at analysis of politics in the US. Let's try an attempted analysis of politics in a country he doesn't know anything about. This could not possibly go badly.
Young people there didn't give a shit about voting, and so the progressive parties of the UK basically heavily tailor their rhetoric towards old center-left, like barely.
No, God, what the hell are you talking about? First of all, that's the other way around. Second of all, actually, when Corbyn got in, suddenly the Labour Party, which had become like this totally irrelevant thing, like nobody took it seriously. Like when the anti-bedroom tax and the anti-cuts movement kicked off in like 2010, 2011, they didn't even bother trying to get support from the Labour Party, who are supposedly the opposition, because nobody would imagine that they would be against that shit, because it's been the exact shit that they'd been pulling since Tony Blair. And even before that, really. So, but then Corbyn gets in, and suddenly, like, huge numbers of people who would be completely disengaged from all this shit, immediately flocked to the Labour Party. It became like the biggest political party in Europe as a result. Which I'm not saying was a good thing, I have to say, because Labour, like the Democrats, is the biggest obstacle to independent working class organizing. Because as long as they can have enough credibility to swallow up social movements, those social movements will come to nothing. So I'm not saying that's a good thing. I was actually not a fan of Corbyn because actually, I mean, he's a piss-weak social democrat on a good day. And he wasn't, I mean, there was actively a move. It turns out there was this leaked report of an internal investigation of the Labour Party, and they had a unit of the party that was secretly sabotaging general election campaigns. Adam, you're quite right. Thatcher did say Blair was her greatest accomplishment. That was exactly.
Center-left leaning. Boomers. And like pensioners, as they say.
No, that's not what happened. This is complete nonsense. Like, what happened is actually, I mean, you see this in quite a few countries. Namely, that because these supposedly center-left parties that had previously been a place working class people and, like, marginalized people could go and expect at least some kind of support for their shit, decided to abandon those constituencies with the sort of neoliberal kick of the 1990s, and since then, though, basically those people decided there was really no point in voting anymore at all because there was nobody who representing them, and really they were screwed no matter what happened. Like, he's putting this entirely backward, and he apparently doesn't know about Corbyn, because Labour was like 2,000 votes short of being in government in 2017.
And, like, young progressives in the UK feel totally left behind, and it's all their fault. They were never willing to vote for the party. They were never willing to make it so that they were a constituent that these politicians relied on, like, maintaining the support of.
Yeah, but the thing is, if you vote for somebody who is already doing things that are against your interest, what reason do they have to turn around and certainly act in your interest, though? That's the whole, like, I mean, I have a feeling he doesn't know about Corbyn. Like, I mean, he clearly does not know about, what he's saying here is just nonsense.
Because they don't understand how politics work. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean...
That's pretty much the long and short of it. But...
I mean, unlike Big Brain Xanderhal here, who,
Regardless, it seems that Biden is still trying. And we will see.
He is very trying.
Depending on the results of this election, if there even still is a democracy afterwards,
There wasn't one beforehand, though. If there were anything resembling a democracy in the first place, Biden would not have been the nominee. Like, Biden was apart from a couple of total no-hopers that had zero name recognition, like fucking Delaney, Biden was bringing up the rear in the fucking primary in 2020. Like, if there was anything democratic about this, Sanders was actually the front runner.
Happens with the Democratic Party.
And I'm not saying, incidentally, to anyone in chat who's like here for the first time, that I'm this huge fan of Sanders. I'm not. I actually am not a fan of him at all. But if we mean in the sense of like a bourgeois democracy where supposedly the people who get the most votes are the ones who win, and there are certain minimum guarantees of free and fair elections, but not so much that you get rid of capitalism so you could really have free and fair elections, then, Biden's career would be over right now. That report was deep. There was a book that came out, a novel called A Very British Coup, and they made a mini-series out of it on Channel 4. Really good book from like the 1980s, and it's basically like Britain gets a prime minister who's like the English Allende, and immediately all sorts of sabotage happens in order to kick him out of office and force him to resign, and there ends up being sort of a low-key military coup. And so much of the way that worked was exactly what the Labour Party bureaucracy did to undermine Corbyn.
Whether this is just to them, Biden losing is just a sign that trying to appeal at all to young people, young radical left-wing perspectives is...
Where are they trying to appeal to young radical left-wing perspectives? Like, where are they trying to appeal? Are they giving, like, young radical left-wing perspectives healthcare? Yeah, I haven't heard them talk about it. Biden said during the campaign last time that he would veto it if the Congress passed it. They're not trying to appeal to shit. And it's not like, and let's just remember, the reason that they had to even make these rhetorical commitments to caring about what people thought was because there was a historic, militant uprising against police terror, and people were extremely aroused, and the Democrats needed to calm the motherfuckers down. That's what that was about. That's all that was about. And the minute they got into power, the minute they won those elections and everything like that, what did they do? They set about flooding the country with cops so that that wouldn't happen again.
Just pointless. It will change nothing. They will just try to keep up this faux idea that they aren't being represented no matter what.
Well, they're not being represented, though. That's the point. That's what they're saying. They're not being represented. That's precisely why they're not voting. They're saying they're not going to vote for it. Because they're not being represented. If there was any kind of representation right now, this genocide would have been over months ago. Because it's not been a popular thing.
Bar will just keep getting raised, unattainably. Well, this will be the real test of that, won't it? Biden pushing for Gaza ceasefire by Ramadan.
That's a complete lie.
White House says, waiting on Hamas sign-off.
Yeah, no, this is not... See, they're doing to ceasefire what they did to defund the police a few years ago. Because when everybody else says ceasefire, they mean the thing ends. It's over. Israel stops murdering people in Gaza and lets food in so they can, like, eat and shit. Whereas, and the Democrats have realized they can't, it was really hurting them for the first few months of this horror to keep on telling people to fuck themselves for calling for a ceasefire. And so they turn around and have this idea they're going to use the word ceasefire. And then qualify it and say, oh, well, what we mean is, like, there's going to be a 5-minute break, and then the genocide resumes.
It seems Israel signed off, the White House has signed off, and they're waiting for Hamas to agree.
No, this is bullshit. Because the reason... Okay, there are two things that the Palestinian resistance are... that are sticking points. One, they want a permanent ceasefire. They want an end to this. And they want an all-for-all hostage exchange. And Biden, first of all, refuses to accept a permanent ceasefire, refuses to accept an all-for-all hostage exchange, and has this wild idea for regime change, where the Palestinian Authority, Israel's little mid-level bureaucrat assholes, ride into Gaza on Israeli tanks and take over. Which is just not gonna fucking happen. It's not going to happen, I mean, like that, because nobody wants them. The reason Fatah lost the last election they actually had to stand in was because they were being rebuked for being massive collaborators and traitors. And they haven't changed. So, like, I mean, if they ride in on the wings of Joe Biden to Gaza... They will be running like hell to get out of there. They'll be running every which way because people will be pelting them with bricks and rotten tomatoes and shit. So yeah, it's not, I mean...
To not be attacking people or Israel.
Did he just, like, wait a second, let me back that up.
Be attacking people off, and they're waiting for Hamas to agree. To not be attacking people or Israel.
To agree to not be... The only people they're attacking right now are the fucking snipers and tanks and APCs and bulldozers that Israel has sent into Gaza to murder their people and destroy every single trace of their existence. Like, they're allowed to do that. Like, is he actually trying to act like that's something that it's, like, unreasonable that the Palestinian resistance should be blowing up the tanks of the people sent to murder them? To the people sent to murder the entire population of Gaza? Is that what he's saying?
So let's see.
We're going to discuss the Middle East and yesterday's tragic and alarming event.
Yeah, the demilitarized state. I mean, that is just fucking chutzpah at this point. Because the last several months have been, if anything, an argument for A, the need to disarm Israel, and B, the need for a real, viable Palestinian deterrent. Like, in particular, they need air defenses. Like, tens of thousands of people would be alive right now if Israel could not, if Israel were not able to fly over Gaza and bomb the place to shit with impunity. Yeah, this floating base. Actually, it was an interesting discussion on the Gaza War sitrep over on the Anti-Empire Project, where Justin Podor, I think his name is, was talking about trying to analyze this. He also pretty clearly dismisses the idea that this has anything to do with aid, because obviously. But he was sort of running through the various possible explanations people have had. It was an interesting discussion. I highly recommend it. Watching that last night.
In North Gaza, trying to get humanitarian assistance in there. In the coming days, we're going to join with our friends in Jordan and others in providing airdrops of additional food and supplies.
Fuck you! There are miles of fucking aid trucks backed up outside Rafah. Like, I mean, all he needs to do is say the word, and Israel will have to open the fucking gates and let all that aid in there that's been there waiting for weeks. Those fucking truckies have been sitting there waiting for weeks to be able to get in there, because nobody wants to leave it 1 minute late when the gates do finally get open and they can bring the shit into the ghetto. I mean, this...
including possibility of a Marine corridor.
One thing that Justin Podor pointed out in his discussion, one possibility that actually seems quite plausible to me as well, is that the U.S. wants to set up a more permanent naval presence on Gaza's coast, because sooner or later somebody is going to run the blockade. Maybe South Africa. I mean, some people in South Africa are talking about it. Maybe Iran. Nobody knows. But somebody, it seems like the longer this goes on, somebody will challenge the blockade. And if the U.S. is there first, they up the stakes of doing that.
Deliver large amounts of humanitarian assistance.
Man.
We're going to insist that Israel facilitate more trucks and more.
I don't know why the audio is so fucked up, but yeah, he's so...
Well, no, it's not the audio that's fucked up. It's what he's saying is fucked up. The microphone is actually indignant at having to be used as a vessel to record this fucking audacious bullshit.
He's so gurgly. He is very gurgly. I get why people think he's, like, old. There is audio, like,
I get why
fuckery.
people think he's, like, old. I mean, could it be that he kind of is? Like, a lot of the people who will be voting in this election weren't born when his political career started as an opponent of the civil rights movement.
Here, probably because, like, every time he turns, it fucks up. You can tell they're using one of those mics that captures your audio, like, you can kind of hear it happening now, probably, whenever I do this.
Well, not to mention the first airdrop, first of all, is 38,000 meals for 2 million starving people. And also, it was actually 0 meals, because that shit had already gone off. So what Biden actually did was empty his bins out on a bunch of starving people. Like, people who are already have been for a while, dealing with the gastrointestinal consequences of disease and malnutrition. And he's, like, putting them in the wonderful Sophie's choice of getting something in their stomach, but it's going to give them food poisoning, which might kill them. Or staring at some stuff that looks like they could eat it and maybe chance it, and while their stomachs rumble and their kids like fucking cry weekly because they haven't eaten in days. Like, I mean, it's just deeply fucked up.
The same effect. So it's whenever he moves his face, he's kind of fucking up the audio.
More routes to get more and more people the help they need. No excuses, because the truth is, aid flowing to Gaza is nowhere nearly enough.
That's your fucking responsibility, motherfucker. Like, the only reason that the trickle of aid that was allowed in the first place was allowed in, Israel didn't want to do that. Yoav Gallant had said, not one drop of water, not one bit of medicine or food, or fuel. He said that, and then, the outrage internationally forced Biden to say, you're going to have to let something in, at least symbolic. And Gallant had to explain that to people because it was him making a humiliating climb down. And he said, yeah, I didn't want to do that either. I'm sorry that I had to do that, but I can't say no to the U.S. Because with every passing day, the consequences of the U.S. cutting Israel loose for Israel get to be more dire. Like, at this point, if the U.S. cut them loose, they would be so fucked. They've basically spent their load at this point.
We should be getting hundreds of trucks in, not just several.
Millions have.
Hundreds of trucks. That sounds really cute. He didn't say a day or anything like that. Like, before the 7th of October, it was an average of a little over 500 truckloads a day. And that wasn't enough. Like, that was deliberately not enough. They had to be supplemented with smuggling. The need is much, much greater now because people don't have fuel, they don't have water, they don't have fucking anything. And the average, Israel boasted that they were letting in an average of 89 trucks a day. That's some days no trucks at all. But so, like, not even a fifth of the already inadequate amount from pre-October 7th.
Whoa, an ad. God damn it, USA Today. Come on. So yeah, Biden seems to actually be taking, at least rhetorically speaking, a pretty hardline stance.
Like, this jabroni talks to people. They're people. A fair number of them. Let me just see. How many subs does this motherfucker have? How many views did this get? He's got 86,000 subs, 2.3 thousand views. Like, 86.3 thousand people care what this motherfucker has to say about politics. And he thinks that if Biden says something to, like, USA Today, that's how he communicates with Israel. Not, he doesn't have a hotline that he calls. He gets Netanyahu on the phone, at all hours or whatever. Not through aid deliveries and delaying them and calling them into question or whatever. No, he goes to the U.S. media and says things that are reassuring to a U.S. audience, and that's what he thinks is the actual stance. Like, this is a hardline stance. Israel was already a record-breaking receiver of U.S. military aid before this. The U.S. has broken every fucking record in terms of the aid that they have sent since the 7th of October. In fact, one of the interesting things that came out in a recent issue of the Gaza War Sitrep on the Anti-Empire Project, John Elmer and Justin Podor, was some of you weren't here yesterday when I mentioned this figure. But, okay, so how many just bombs would you say the U.S. has sent to Israel? No looking. These are the official figures I'm going by. How many, chat, do you think they sent so far? Do, 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 do. 21,000. Now, chat, how many do you think Israel has dropped by their own figures since the 7th of October? How many out of 21,000 bombs the U.S. has sent have they dropped? 26,000. They used up the ones they had and everything the U.S. has been sending them. Like, that's this jabroni's idea of a hardline stance towards Israel. Like, I mean, it's a hardline stance in favor of genocide. Anyway.
Stating that the Palestinians are in a crisis, they need aid.
They're not in a crisis. This isn't a fucking earthquake happened.
It's not a small amount of aid they need, but a substantial amount of aid.
Yeah, and he didn't give any numbers. He said hundreds of trucks. Like, over what period?
It's pretty significant.
No, it
especially
isn't.
when also calling for a ceasefire.
Which he wasn't. He was calling for, like, the U.S. The best the U.S. is doing is less than what Israel was Israel's best offer. Israel's best offer was an 8-week ceasefire. The best the U.S. has offered is 6 weeks. What the Palestinians want is permanent.
Israel has allegedly agreed to a 6-week ceasefire in Gaza. We'd all love for it to be permanent, but, you know, we take what we can.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just a nice to have. Like, I mean, because yeah, we couldn't. Yeah, we'd like them to just stop doing genocide altogether, but I mean, it doesn't really matter too much to Xanderhal. He's not living in Gaza. He's over in fucking California or wherever the hell he is. Florida, maybe? I don't remember. I don't care. But he's not in Gaza. So this is not. This is just sort of a neat a thing that he doesn't care about.
Get. I'm sure the Twitter lefties will find a way to raise the bar from here even more.
Nobody's raising the bar. The bar has been the same altogether. A ceasefire. What Biden is doing is lowering the bar, trying to redefine the term, appropriate the term that people have been demanding, and then redefine it to mean a break of a few weeks from genocide. I mean, this man is vile. It's like every time I watch this guy, I think I've seen the worst thing he's ever said. And each time I turn him on again, he says something worse.
More, even higher. Remember, it's always going to be unattainable for any Democrat that's not like literally a communist wearing a.
You don't have like there are plenty of people who aren't literal communists saying that that this needs to end. Like most of the world, like most of the people in the U.S., like most of the Democrats' voters, like the World Court, which issued an order weeks ago saying that Israel needed to stop killing and maiming Palestinians and stop obstructing aid. That is literally the entirety of what their so-called military operation is, and the World Court already said it needs to stop.
A hammer and sickle pin on their lapel. Gaza, Israel has essentially agreed to a 6-week ceasefire in Gaza that would include the release of hostages, and negotiators are now
whose
waiting
hostages? Like all of them, like including the 10,000 hostages Israel's got?
for Hamas to sign off on the deal, U.S. officials said Saturday. Quote, the ball is literally in the court of Hamas, one official said. The Israelis, quote, have more or less accepted
Well, they've accepted something totally unacceptable.
framework of a deal that would include a 6-week ceasefire and the release of vulnerable hostages, including women, children, and those who are elderly or wounded, said senior administration officials, speaking on the condition of anonymity.
Yeah, I mean, this is what they've been doing all along. I mean, the administration plants these leaked stories from anonymous officials in order to create this impression of distance between the U.S. and Israel on this.
President Joe Biden said Friday he hopes that a deal can be in place by the start of the Muslim fasting month of Ramadan, which begins March 10th.
Now, the reason Ramadan comes into it, I mean, it's not that Biden suddenly gives a fuck about Muslims, and it's certainly not that Israel does. It's that Israel is really worried that, I mean, with all of their threats against the Al-Aqsa Mosque, amongst other things, that if this thing is going on during Ramadan, then shit is going to kick off really and truly. I mean, in the West Bank, it's been kicking off so much, as John Elmer pointed out, any other time, the amount of resistance activity that's been going on in the West Bank, you'd be calling it an intifada. Like, I mean, if this continues through Ramadan, things will kick off properly. That is the fear. That's why they want to try to cool things down without actually ending it. Ah, goeie aand. Ik ga niet voor iemand stemmen. Ik stem daarvoor dat die doorsnittelijke leeftijdsverwachting bij Biden en Trump zich bewaarheidt.
Biden is under pressure to... So that's 9 days from now. Biden is under pressure to call for a ceasefire as hunger and disease spread in Gaza after months of attacks by Israel following the state of the Israel-Hamas war. The U.S. began airdropping humanitarian aid into the area on Saturday.
Yes, and it was literal garbage.
Days after over 100 Palestinians... By the way, the whole, airdropping aid into Gaza, you wouldn't have heard that from any of these people. They probably don't even know about it, or if...
No, fuck off. Like, we've all been talking about it, Xanderhal. We've been talking about it because it's bullshit. It's a PR stunt. Like, literally, you can look at what the Palestinians in Gaza are saying about it. I notice you never seem to be interested in them. But what they're saying is, this is bullshit. They're the ones who pointed out that the stuff had gone off, that he was sending shit that was literally, just a trap for food poisoning. And let's also just remember that Israel is constantly overflying Gaza to drop bombs and shit. And just do surveillance flights as well. The only way the U.S. is going to airdrop anything in Gaza is by coordinating with Israel. Just to avoid mid-air collisions, it would be essential. Which means Israel knows in advance when and where these drops are going to be, and so they can set up ambushes. As they have done repeatedly. There's been multiple flower massacres now. Because, and this is partially because everybody refuses to coordinate with the actual, government of Gaza. Everybody refuses, if the resistance were involved in this, they could actually probably prevent these massacres if they knew it in advance and they could set up, counter sniper teams, because they have a pretty good record taking out Israeli snipers. If they were to know in advance, they could set up to be able to protect people from that shit, because they've been doing a really good job of that, actually. But instead, everybody refuses to coordinate with them because it's Hamas. And so, the only people who know in advance about any of this is Israel, and Israel uses as an opportunity to fucking do target practice on a bunch of starving people.
If you told them about it, they would find a way to explain how it's actually the U.S. being supportive of the genocide in some way.
Well, yeah, it is supportive of the genocide. It is a fucking PR effort.
The U.S. began airdropping humanitarian aid into the area on Saturday, days after over 100 Palestinians...
He shows absolutely no interest in what Palestinians have to say about any of this. There's plenty in English about what Palestinians have to say about it. I know, my Arabic sucks, so I'm reliant on all the stuff that's available in English of what Palestinians in Gaza are saying about all of this. So, the only reason he's not looking at that is because he doesn't give a shit.
Were killed when witnesses said Israeli forces fired at people waiting for food in Gaza City. Officials said the airdrops would make sure that food and other commodities get to the people who need them. And
no, they won't. 38,000 meals for 2 million people who have not been eating regularly in months.
Help prevent the looting that has plagued the delivery of goods.
Fuck you, looting. I love how when starving people run to get at least a little bit of the inadequate aid that is being allowed in. Because the thing is, everybody is starving to some extent or another. So obviously, and there's not enough food to get around. If they just simply wait, there's a chance they won't get any. So of course everybody's fucking desperately flocking to these trucks the minute they come in. Calling it looting. Fuck you, man. Looting is what, the fucking Israel goon squads, the fucking Einsatzgruppen that they have, are doing on TikTok when they run into fucking Gaza women's bedrooms and start, pulling out their underwear and using it and showing it off as fucking trophies. That's looting. Starving people flocking to any source of food that shows up in the area, that ain't looting.
Into the region on the ground. Over 30,000 Palestinians have died in Gaza since the start of the war after Hamas militants stormed
They have
southern
died. Like, nobody knows how.
Israel on October 7th, killing 1,200 people.
Which is also actually not true. I mean, at this point, it's not clear exactly who killed how many people on the 7th of October. It may never be entirely clear because Israel has done a damn good job of destroying all the forensic. And so there's just not going to be a way to be entirely certain. But what we do know, and this is from the Israeli press, they've been investigating this, is that actually a substantial number of the people who died on October 7th, of the Israelis who died on October 7th, were killed by the Israeli army, either in the wild, chaotic crossfire, or because of the Hannibal Directive, which was activated.
And taking 250 others hostage. Negotiations on a ceasefire deal are ongoing in Doha, Qatar.
He's like literally never heard of either Doha or Qatar.
Qatar, I think I got it right. And significant progress has been made over the past few weeks, officials said. But like all things, until a deal is actually done, it's not done, one official said. Hamas is yet to agree to the terms of the deal, officials
now I wonder, is the article going to point out what it is that the Palestinians are asking for that Israel and the U.S. don't want to give them?
Said. Biden spoke with the Emir of Qatar, Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, and Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. I know this guy. Abdel Fattah.
Jesus, like, this guy speaks with such fucking confidence about what's going on in the Middle East and the U.S. role in it. Oh, sorry to hear that, Riveroon. And he's, like, reading these names like he's never seen them before. Like, the capital of fucking Qatar. He actually reads that like, Doha? I thought it was Do-Re. Sí, no. Conche tu madre, weón. Si no sabí nada de la wea, entonces limítate a jugar videojuego, alguna mierda así, pues, weón. Who knows? I've never looked into, like, I've never seen him, like, do explicitly sponsored content. So I don't know what his deal is there.
Al-Sisi about the framework of the deal and about other issues that still need to be resolved. The question, officials said, is whether Hamas is committed to releasing hostages as part.
That is not the question. They've been saying for months that there's been a deal to release them all on the table for months now. The only time any substantial number of them has been released was in the context of a negotiated deal. Like, literally, I mean, people, like, you'll see people be like, they need to just release the hostage right now without any kind of deal. And it's like, motherfucker, do you think when the bombs are just falling in massive quantities on a city, that you're doing people a favor by kicking them out into the street? Like, that's how you can't do that. They're gonna get killed. In fact, Israel has killed way more hostages, like, including just executing them, than they have rescued, because they don't really care about the hostages. Like, I mean, this is
part of any agreement.
The
hostages have to be released, one official said. Is Hamas committed to do that? That's really the main issue now. I don't know, guys.
That's not the issue. The issue, like, Hamas has been committed to that shit. They're the only ones who've shown any commitment to that shit. In fact, they keep on pointing out, like, Abu Ubaidah, in his most recent speech that I know about, made a point of saying, it's not just us starving. If we're starving, we don't have food for the hostages either. Because, I mean, and like former hostages have said, like, they eat whatever it is that Qassam fighters are eating. So if there's nothing to eat, there's nothing to eat for them either. There isn't some magic food source that hostages get to draw on. So, like, they're literally starving the hostages to death right now, too. And a lot of them are older people.
Here's the thing.
And a lot of them are military, it's worth remembering.
The outcome of this will be what really decides.
Yeah, they literally shot captives who were yelling, help us, begging for mercy in Hebrew and wearing, with their shirts off and waving white flags. And then later on, in, I believe it was the Israeli press, one of the soldiers involved in this explained that, you know, that this was an understandable mistake to make because they normally shoot at Palestinians who were waving white flags with their shirts off begging for help. I mean, like, the one group of people who've shown any commitment to releasing captives are the Palestinians.
It's whether people start to sway in any way, shape, or form more into Biden's favor on the left. No 8 days? Oh no, it's the second. I totally forgot. I thought it was the first. My bad, Lucky Otter. My bad. I thought it was the first. You're totally right. 8 days from now.
He knew he was going to be talking about this shit. He didn't bother to check when Ramadan is. I will admit I don't know exactly when it is either. Shit, I don't even know. I don't even know when my own fucking traditional holidays are. They're in a lunar calendar too, and I only know about them because people fucking post about them on Facebook. But like, he's just so incurious. He just does not seem to pay any fucking attention to any of this stuff, and then he feels like he can talk about it. And it is just so fucking pathetic, and he just makes me want to smack him. And I have a feeling in 10 years' time, this motherfucker will be the State's Department spokesman.
So, what's really going to make up the decision on whether or not people's opinions towards Biden change on this issue
is whether he ends the genocide that he's doing,
is how this ends up turning out. And what decides how this turns out at the end of the day here, realistically, is not Israel.
Really? Okay, chat, taking bets. What is he about to say it's down to? It's not Israel, the people doing the genocide. So is he going to say it's the U.S., without whom the genocide would be impossible? Is he, like, who is he going to say? Who do you think it's going to be? Who is he going to say is the decider in this?
I actually do believe Israel won't just bomb countless civilians.
What the what? I got nothing. Back this shit up.
I believe Israel won't, realistically, is not Israel. I actually do believe Israel won't just bomb countless civilians.
Motherfucker, they already have. They have already committed a massacre that, I mean, historians, like mainstream historians, are trying to figure out what the most recent parallel is. And and it turns out like World War II is about the closest they can find anything. Like this century, this is the worst massacre of civilians that has been seen. It is certainly the absolutely most evil thing I have lived through in my lifetime. I mean, and they've murdered 40,000 people. They're deliberately starving 2 million people to death. And this motherfucker's like, oh, I really don't think that they're gonna bomb large numbers of civilians?
During the ceasefire, out of nowhere.
Yeah, except that why would you think that? They have literally done that every single time. Like during the humanitarian pause, they didn't even stop bombing. The only place they stopped bombing was their so-called safe zone in Rafah. Like everywhere else they were still bombing. People were still getting killed by Israel, by Israeli fire, during the humanitarian pause. Every single ceasefire has been broken by Israel. And I'm not talking about since October 7th. There's not a whole lot of examples there. I'm talking about like since I mean, probably before this as well, but at the very least, since the medieval siege began on Gaza back in 2006.
They will continue to bomb civilians if Hamas doesn't agree to the ceasefire, or
Hamas. Motherfucker. Like, Destiny gets a lot of well-deserved hate for his horrible takes on this. I mean, he deserves it. He deserves to have all the shit heaped on him. But Xanderhal, I mean, this is wild. Like, and again, 83,000 people think this motherfucker has something worthwhile to say. Yeah, the West Bank has been attacked all along. This video is from 5 days ago in who fuck knows what universe. I don't know what kind of facial hair Spock has in it.
or if Hamas breaks the ceasefire.
Which is literally not how any ceasefire has actually... Like, what... this motherfucker, like, found out that there is Israel 5 minutes ago. I've never seen him ever talk about Palestine, before all this. And he just sort of talks about this like his analysis should matter to anyone.
And God knows what will happen if we aren't able to continue it after the 6-week agreement, if it does.
Well, wait a second. The whole point of the reason that the U.S. and Israel are insisting on a few weeks rather than a permanent ceasefire is because they fully intend to resume the slaughter afterwards, assuming that they ever stop it in the first place. Like, that is literally the point of contention. The Palestinians want a permanent ceasefire because they have every right for this to just end. They do not, I mean, that is not an unreasonable thing. He's acting like we've gotten to a point where just saying don't do genocide is treated as some sort of unreasonable radical demand. And this motherfucker who's supposedly, a lefty influencer on social media is very much playing the role of making that the case. And that is vile. Because, like, if the bombs just stop falling on Gaza and the Israeli military withdraws, motherfuckers will still be dying. Like, all they have to do at this point now that, like, even theoretically edible things have been basically exhausted in Gaza, all they have to do is wait.
Get agreed to in the first place. The problem is Hamas is, well, it is a terror group, and they do want to genocide Jews.
No, they fucking don't. That is just a lie, actually. Like, yeah, they had some really fucked up anti-Semitic shit in their very original charter, which they had, for all intents and purposes, abandoned by 2009, when this jabroni was 10 years old. Like, so before he was even old enough to read that fucking charter, they had abandoned it, because they were already offering 1967 borders in 2009. The U.S. and Israel responded with the Cast-led massacre. That has been the way that the U.S. and Israel have responded every time a peace offer comes from Hamas. At the same time as they've been, like, deliberately trying to genocide people in slow-mo in Gaza from fucking starvation and disease. Like, so in 2017, they got sick of having this charter held against them that they had abandoned for all intents and purposes, so they adopted a new charter, and that charter is very explicit. And it says, no, our problem is not with Jews. Our problem is with the Zionist occupation of Palestine. And and if you listen to their rhetoric, actually, since they adopted that, and even before that, really, they very clearly make that distinction. Like, if you listen to, I haven't listened to a whole lot of Abu Ubaida's speeches, but I've caught them occasionally, because I like to just keep an eye on what he's saying as well, since I hear everybody, what everybody else has to say on it. And he makes a point of distinguishing. Because they have very clearly adopted that position. So what he's saying is just bullshit. Well, I mean, what he's saying is just a lie, and it is wild that he's, accusing them of genocide when Israel has openly stated their intent to genocide 2 million people in Gaza. I never watched F Troop.
You have to understand, many of the Muslim extremists around Israel that attack Israel don't just do so because Israel is an imperialistic regime that is taking their land and killing their people.
Actually, that is literally the reason. And in fact, if you ask them, they're actually, which you can do because they're not strangers with their opinions. It's not like they're keeping this a fucking secret. You can ask them. And they say, yeah, we don't give a fuck about the ethnicity of our colonizers. If they were Italian Protestants, we would feel the exact same way. We do not want to be genocided. We do not want to be colonized. We want to actually have our fucking land back. This line is just literally just fucking Zionist propaganda now. He's just doing Zionist genocidal propaganda. Well, you have to remember that this guy started out in his teens as a literal Nazi, which ought to have given him pause about whether he was the guy to be having opinions that he should be sharing with people like this.
They also do it because they are anti-Semitic,
No, actually, that's not true. In fact, if you look at the situation with anti-Jewish sentiment in the Middle East, the place that actually anti-Semitism is big is the place that invented it, which is Europe. Anti-Semitism is a European phenomenon. You look at the relationship of Arab Jews in the Arab world, and what you find is actually, it wasn't, there was persecution and shit, but nothing on the same level. For the most part, it was a fairly peaceful coexistence between Muslims, Christians, and Jews. What actually soured the relations, and actually Arab Jews, particularly Palestinian Jews who were already there before the Zionists got there, were very vehement about this, was the Zionists showing up and saying they were going to steal Arab land in the name of all the Jews. And, Palestinian Jews said, you're fucking our shit up here, get out of here, you're ruining our relationships with our neighbors. And the Zionist paramilitaries responded by putting them on the hit list.
It's like they unironically they have their justifications of racism or anti-Semitism justified by the fact that Israel is attacking them and it's a mostly Jewish nation.
What the fuck did he just say? Literally, syntactically, lexicosyntactically, I do not understand what he just said. Backing it up.
Racism or anti-Semitism, they have their justifications of racism or anti-Semitism justified by the fact that Israel is attacking them.
So their justifications of their justifications are justified by the fact that Israel is attacking them. That sounds a little bit like you could simplify the sentence and say the reason they're actually pissed off is that Zionists invaded and colonized them, actually.
And it's a mostly Jewish nation. So it's twofold. And we need to remember that just because the aggression from Israel could go away does not mean that the hatred towards Israel is going to go away for a lot of reasons.
Well, yeah, because it's a fucking racist regime. It is an apartheid state. The situation before October 7th was not peaceful. They were doing pogroms in the West Bank. That was what October 7th was a response to, for fuck's sake. This motherfucker seems to have only become aware of any of this after October 7th, and he has taken zero time to inform himself before, like, fucking crap spewing into the internet.
Reasons. Yeah, it's a self-reinforcing cycle, too, because many Israelis are also quite Islamophobic.
Well, well, it is a racist regime. Like, literally, if your ID says that you're, like, legally racialized as Jewish, you have more rights than anyone else in the country. Like, literally, I mean, they're probably going to change it. They've occasionally, like, imposed ideological tests. Like, when Argentine Jews tried to flee to Israel because the neo-Nazi dictatorship there, backed by the U.S. and armed by Israel, was trying to kill a lot of Jews. Israel didn't let a lot of them in because they said, ideologically, you're not Zionists and we don't want you. So we're gonna let the junta we're arming kill you. But like literally, I have a better chance of getting citizenship in that country than Palestinian friends of mine have of even being allowed to visit their family home.
Xanderhal, why won't Twitter
What
progressives...
is he drinking? That looks like the bottle of conditioner that comes with hair color. Is he drinking the color treatment?
vote for Biden, either if they do or do not get what they want?
Could we? I mean, I love how this is all about like supposedly what's going on here is it's about whether like fucking Twitter leftists get what they want, not about the tens of thousands of people murdered, not about the 2 million people who are facing a very slow and agonizing, possibly very fast and agonizing death by starvation. I mean, the UN World Food Program people, whose entire job is to keep track of situations of extreme hunger, saying they have never seen a population's nutritional status degrade as quickly as the people of Gaza. Like, this motherfucker has not got any time to talk about what actually people in Gaza are facing. Because the minute you start talking about that, you start to notice that, like, maybe there's a reason people want it to end.
They want a virtue signal. What can I say to Lancer? Like, people like this just like virtue signaling. They don't care about what happens. And once again...
See, on the other... Yeah, I mean, people are opposed to genocide just because they want to be good people. Whereas, Xanderhal doesn't want to be a good person. And he's very good at not being a good person, so he doesn't give a shit.
Once again, I will ask you to remember, when it comes to these Twitter lefties, when it comes to a public figure on the left, whatever it may be, I want you to think about how much of their social status and success, their popularity, and their bottom line relies, or at least would be heavily improved by, Donald Trump winning the election, and us getting at the very least 4 more years of wall-to-wall, insane Trump coverage.
Well, I mean, I can't help but noticing that Xanderhal wasn't hurting from 4 years of Trump the last time. I seem to remember that actually Trump was a career maker for Xanderhal. Like, literally, if I remember correctly, he benefited very heavily from Trump getting elected because it offered the perfect backdrop for his whole grift about how he wants people to pay him money for not being a Nazi anymore. And claiming that he alone can tell you exactly how to deprogram the Nazis by, like, teaching them, I guess, to be, like, liberal Zionists. But I notice it is time for me to start wrapping up. It is nearly 1 a.m. This took longer than I was expecting. You know, this is a 16-minute video. Actually, we almost finished. I mean, let me see. 13:18. But for like every minute he's talked, I think I might have talked 10. Which is fairly par for the course. But just want to thank everybody for joining. Let me also drop the Discord links, just in case anyone in chat isn't already there. And I will be back Yeah, this stream went very quickly for me as well. Like, I just checked the clock for the first time and it's like, shit, it's almost 1 a.m. But yeah, I did almost have an aneurysm when he said he didn't think that Israel was just gonna bomb huge numbers of people apropos another. God, so that could have been fun. That would have been some exclusive content. You could have watched me have a berry aneurysm on stream. Um, Actually, I think I may actually like clip that one bit and just have it. Xanderhal gives Elise a berry aneurysm with this wildly ignorant genocide apologetic take, or something like that. I don't know. I have to wordsmith that bullshit a bit. But anyway, I will be back next week on Friday, 11:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, and I look forward to seeing you all then. Well, I guess part of why it went so fast is I did start a little bit late. Have a good night, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. I think I will do that as a short on YouTube, Adam. Have a